Hi, my name is Alyssa Mason. I'm a pediatric occupational therapist. Before I did occupational therapy, I spent a lot of time teaching in early childhood, and I also have experience working in children's mental health. So this topic of sensory processing and trauma is really something that I am very interested in and have spent a lot of time working with. So I'm happy to share things with you today. I really want to make sure that I have a lot of time to give you guys some tools, so I'm going to go over some quick information and then we're going to jump in and actually do some strategies. So the main sensory systems that I like to recommend when we're thinking about regulating our body is going to be our tactile system, which is looking at our touch, thinking about that touch sense. And then our proprioceptive system, which is an internal sense, that's looking at how our muscles and joints are kind of activating and moving, things like that. And then our vestibular system, which has to do with how our body is responding to gravity. So it's thinking about where our head is at in space. So if you think about being on a swing where we're going back and forth and your head is moving, that's targeting that vestibular sense. So then some things I want you to remember today that are going to be really helpful for regulating kids is that if we can be proactive and keep kids from getting to that really upset, dysregulated state, that's going to be the best thing that we can do. So I'll mention it a lot. This is a great proactive strategy. Proactive is definitely the best way to go. We want to teach strategies to kids while they're calm. We want to see if we can teach strategies to all the kids in the classroom, remembering that regulation is something that we all do. We need to self-regulate for ourselves before we can help kids regulate and do that co-regulation. So that's going to be something that's really important, is kind of to do that teaching while everyone's calm. And then I like to give things a name. So if we're doing something like a big bear hug, let's call it a bear hug every single time. This is important because it helps kids learn kind of how to self-advocate and self-regulate in the future. Now they know that they can go and ask for that thing that helps them feel calm because we've given it a name. So you'll see me model that a little bit when we get to strategies as well. Thinking about this group of kids who might have a lot of trauma, we know that sometimes they can have feel unsafe, or touch can be confusing, that close contact, some of those things that we oftentimes do with regulation, those close hugs and things like that. So I'm really going to focus a lot on strategies where maybe we can be a step away, or give kids a little more control over what they are doing to regulate. Because if kids are not accepting of what we're offering, it's usually not going to help calm them down. So we want to figure out what can we do and how do we get them to kind of buy in and be engaged in this process of regulating with you to calm back down. Some things that can help kids to get to that acceptance are to model those strategies for yourself, to use them for the whole classroom. Like I said, it's not something special we're doing for you because you're so upset all the time. It's something that we all do because we all need to regulate. Allowing for kids to have choices within, do you want this or that, so that they can have a little more control of what they're doing to regulate. And then doing things with them instead of to or for. As caregivers, we always want to help them or fix the kid, fix the problem, because that's what we're kind of there to do. But what we really want to do is to join with them. It's co-regulation. So maybe we're both taking deep breaths. Maybe we're both rocking our bodies back and forth. If we can do it with them, we usually get a little more buy-in than if we're trying to force something on them or do it to them. And then you always want to share what you're doing. So with touch, we want to tell kids before we're touching, we want to tell them what we're going to do, where our hands are going to be, things like that, so that we can increase that feeling of safety and connection with that. And it gives them the opportunity to kind of let us know, yes, no, whether they're into it or not, and really looking at those verbals and nonverbal responses to know if kids are accepting of it, since they're not always necessarily able to say, yes, I want that, or no, I don't. How is their body responding? If they're looking really rigid, if they're pulling away, pushing, pulling, running away, then maybe that strategy is not working and we've got to try something else. That's very important with this group of kids. And then let's jump into some strategies. So here with me today is my niece, who has nicely volunteered to be my model for some of these strategies, so you guys can really see what it looks like so that you're ready to utilize these things in your classroom. So this is Taya. We've practiced lots of these things, so I might not ask her for consent before I do each of them, but we need to remember that in our classrooms, we need to be doing that. We need to be asking for consent for kids. I will model it at least some of the time. But again, if we want to really regulate, kids have to be kind of accepting of those regulation strategies. So we're going to start with some of the things that you're probably already doing in your classroom, but I want to tell you some ways to make it more impactful and really to target those sensory systems when you're doing them. So we're going to talk about hugs first. We're hugging kids all the time. We hug them hello, we hug them goodbye. But if we add some pressure to those hugs, they become more of a sensory experience and they can be more regulating. It's going to really target that proprioceptive system like I was talking about. So when we're going to do a hug with a kid who's really upset, we want to give it a different name. And I mentioned that earlier. So we might want to call it a bear hug or a deep squeeze or a big hug. We want to give it a name so that kids can start to understand that this is a tool that they're using for regulation, so that down the road they're able to advocate for that for themselves. So Tam, I'm going to have you turn and sit facing me.
Oh.
All right.
You got my shoe.
I did. Okay, so the first thing that you're going to want to do is you're going to want to ask for consent. So, can I give you a bear hug? Okay. And then when you're giving the hug, you want to really squeeze. You want to squeeze and you want to hold. So you're going to squeeze that whoever you're trying to help regulate, and you're going to hold. You could add a little rock. You could add a rhythmic counting to it. I'm going to squeeze for 5. So you're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then let go. If we're still really upset, we might do another squeeze. And then count again to 5. You can sit up. And those squeezes are what's really targeting, like I said, like those muscles and joints, and really targeting that proprioceptive system that can be really regulating. With squeezes, it doesn't also have to be a whole hug. Can you sit with your back towards me? Yep, so you're going to look at the wall. All right, so we're going to have you sit up. Squeezes don't have to be hugs. They can also just be squeezes. So if we're behind you, maybe at a group time or something like that, and we're getting upset, we can do squeezes on arms. You can sit up. We could do squeezes on legs. We could do squeezes on our back. So we could do a squeeze like this where we're pushing there. Again, we can add rocking or counting or anything like that to those squeezes, but when we do that, we really add kind of that sensory aspect to a hug. All right, and then you can sit up. We'll sit like this again. So then another strategy that I know a lot of us are using is heavy work, which is really lifting something heavy, carrying something around. I know lots of teachers are using those heavier backpacks or things like that. If we can use this as a proactive strategy, especially during transitions, it can really help keep kids calm. So think about a basket like the one I have on the table over here. That basket, you could put all your group time things into the basket. Make sure it has a little bit of weight to it so that they're really trying to put in some effort. And then they're going to be able to pick that up and carry it over to the group time rug so that they're targeting, again, that proprioceptive system. Heavy work is lifting, dragging, pulling, pushing, carrying something. But that can be a really great proactive strategy. Another one that we're using a lot with our babies would be rocking. But that's targeting that vestibular system, and that's really good for our older kids too. So it might not be something where we can walk around and bounce them like we do the babies or rock them like we do the babies, but there are lots of ways to work rocking into kind of an age-appropriate activity. So Tay and I will model kind of a row, row, row your boat that includes rocking that some of you guys might do. Can you come sit right here? All right, here we go. So you can do row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. And when you do that, it's targeting that vestibular system. It's that same kind of rocking that we get when we're rocking a baby, but it's more age appropriate, and it's good for engaging those older kids that we have. With the little ones, we know, we're rocking little babies all the time, so that's a really great strategy. So let's keep doing that. Another one that I really like to do is something that's sensory play. So I know we'll see, we have sensory tables and we do messy play in our classrooms, especially if you've noticed kids that really like, say, water or they like rice. If we can take that and use it as a regulation strategy, that can be really helpful. So sometimes when a kid's really upset, we don't want to give them rice because we know they might just throw it across the room, dump the bowl, whatever it is. So I like having something like this. It's covered up. We don't have to give them the rice for rice to be useful. And it could be beans or whatever it is. Rice can activate our visual systems, our auditory systems, as well as those tactile systems. So you could just start with, we don't even have to do anything directly, again, 2 or 4. I can just be next to you and I can just let her hear that, let her watch that. And rice makes a really nice sound. It's kind of like that rain stick sound. So we can just go back and forth and we can see, is this kid watching? Are they looking? Does it seem like they hear it? Did all of a sudden they kind of perk up and look towards that? Then maybe that's where that strategy is working. Even if we're still crying, it might be the beginning of that kind of starting regulation. If you feel like you can open it up, then we can do something like you put your arm on top. You put your arm on top. You could do something like raining the rice down on their arm, which you'll get a lot of kids will calm down with something like that, and we can just rain that rice down and down and down. And that'll be really regulating for a lot of kids. And then if you feel comfortable, they can just play in it. A lot of times just having their hands in rice really calms them down as well. If I'm doing something like raining rice down on a kid's arm, I like to end that with an arm squeeze or something right over that spot. So I'll do like just a squeeze over because rice has a really light touch, and our light touch can actually be pretty alerting. And so if we have something that's really alerting, we want to kind of end it with a deep pressure touch because our deep pressure is going to be more calming than our light touch. So I usually just end it with an arm squeeze and say, oh, the rain is all done, something like that. So that's a really great strategy. Another one that I like is to do our bear walks. Taya's a really good bear walker. If you're doing like a cleanup time, I like to call it, say the bears are collecting their food for winter. So we would have the toys out on the rug and we would bear walk to clean them all up. So Taya, we're gonna bear walk and put all of our toys on top of the bin. Can you bear walk and get all the toys on top? Perfect. So we can do that to put it in a bin, get it all cleaned up that way. That's again targeting that vestibular system where we're kind of changing that area of gravity that we have. All right. And then one of the other ones that I know a lot of you guys are already using would be deep breaths. It's a great strategy, great one to target. For our babies where we can't say, hey, let's do this song or this game or this activity, we can model those things. So if we have a baby on our chest, we can take deep breaths. Our deep breaths are going to be really regulating. They can feel it. They can hear it if we're taking a deep breath and kind of blowing that air out. They're going to be able to hear that. We're going to keep doing it. We're going to be really regular with that. It's going to be a really good regulating thing. For our older kids, I love to pair it with a nonverbal. So we could do our tummy and our chest. And we could do big belly breaths where you want, hands to rise. When we pair it with a nonverbal, then we can use that nonverbal to kind of be a prompt or a reminder that maybe they could use that strategy. So I could be away from you, but I could do this, and the kid might get the message that let's take a deep breath, even without me needing to use words. So those nonverbals can be really helpful in that way. So let's add those into whatever strategies you're already using in your classroom. If you're doing square breathing or something like that, maybe we add this visual to that every time we say it so that kids can then see you do this and know that we're going to take some deep breaths. Going to be great strategies. And then we're going to go into some oral sensory ones next. Okay, so I also wanted to make sure to get you guys some strategies for those really oral kids who like to have things in their mouths, or they really love their pacifiers or their bottles, and maybe they're transitioning off of those. So there are some other things we can do to help them get that kind of regulating thing. We give a kid a pacifier, a lot of times all of a sudden they're not crying anymore, they're okay. That sucking motion can be really calming. So if we don't have that, or even a kid who didn't use a pacifier or a bottle, this is a great strategy to try. And that's to put a thick liquid into a cup and let them drink it out of a straw. So think yogurt or an applesauce, put it into a cup, give them a straw, and let them suck that up. That's giving them a similar experience to what they were getting with the pacifier or the bottle. So that can be really calming. And again, not just for those kids who use pacifiers. You can try this for all kids, see how they respond to it. I know we oftentimes use snacks to help calm kids down. It's an easy classroom strategy, right? To say, okay, let me give them a cracker and maybe they'll calm down. So to kind of increase the sensory regulation piece with giving snacks, there are some snacks that tend to be more calming. So if you're able to do something creamy, warm, smooth, those are really good things to do. So some of our softer fruits like strawberries, peaches, bananas, those are really good ones. Oatmeal that's warm is another really good one. Avocados that are soft, those tend to have a longer term regulating effect versus a cracker, which might calm you down while you have it, but then we oftentimes see that kind of, I'm upset again as soon as my cracker is done. So that's a really good way to get increased regulation with those snacks as strategies. And then I know we don't all have it in our budget to get Chewies or buy things, but if you do have the option to have Chewies in your classroom, I think they're a really great tool. These are meant to be chewed on. They're pretty sturdy. There's lots of different shapes, colors, sizes, things like that. And again, this is just something kids can chew on. And instead of being worried that people are going to be like, don't put that in your mouth, take that out of your mouth, we're allowing this, we're giving this. This is a strategy you can use. There are lots of these. They come on necklaces sometimes that kids can wear, so they always have it available for them. They're a great tool. For some of our older kids too who like to chew, gum becomes an appropriate tool if they can safely manage it and keep it in their mouth. That just constant chewing can help keep our whole body kind of calm and together. So that can be a really great strategy as well. And then we're going to jump into some more strategies. But I really want to call out that counting can be a really regulating thing. So adding that into a lot of our strategies is going to be super helpful. We're going to do that a little bit in some of these next strategies. So I'm going to have Taya come back to join us. All right. So for some of our friends who have a tough time with that touch or those intimate, close connections like hugs and bear hugs and those things, I sometimes like to see if they'll allow me to touch their feet. I know lots of our kids end up on the floor, rolling around, kicking, not refusing to go anywhere else. So I always want to get down on their level to meet them where they're at. And then I'll try to introduce strategies that way. So can you lay down? We're going to do the feet ones. All right, so if I'm down here, this is where I say we want to share what we're doing. So this would be an example of that. I would say, can I touch your feet?
Yeah.
And she says yes, so then I can touch her feet. But I can also introduce all of what I'm gonna do. So sometimes we're not gonna get a yeah. Sometimes we're not gonna get any response to that. So I'm gonna say, here come my hands, they're gonna touch your feet. I'm gonna give you some squeezes on your feet. I'm gonna give you some squeezes on your ankle. And this is where we're looking for those nonverbal responses then of, are we pulling away, are we rolling away, are we kicking your hands away, or are we accepting those things? And then if we are, then I start to do some more strategies. I might do some leg rolls and squeezes. We're gonna do our leg rolls, and I'm gonna tell her what we're gonna do. We're gonna roll your legs up and squeeze them in like a hug, and come back down. And we can do counting with that. Let's do 5. 1. And we're gonna go slow. We're gonna keep it nice and big squeezes. 2, 3, and then we'll go up to 5. Another one you can do with legs and feet is our bicycles, where we do one leg at a time. And same thing, we're squeezing at the top to kind of get that deep pressure in there. Lots of kids like to go fast. That's going to be a little more alerting than calming. If fast is how you get started and that's how you get them to be engaged, that's great. Then I like to say something like, oh no, we got to a hill. It's so hard. We have to push so hard on our pedals so that we can slow it down and climb up to the top of the hill. And then we can slow down that way. If we can't get to those squeezes or that's too much, sometimes I just say, your body's looking really angry. I noticed you stomping your feet. Can I help you stomp your feet? And we'll just try to get really regulated this way with big stomps so they're getting some input into their body. And and use those counting. So we can do 10 big stomps or something like that. We can do 2-footed stomps and say, you know, okay, I know that you're feeling kind of angry right now. Let's stomp that out. Let's do it together. Can I help you? Those kinds of things to kind of get them engaged that way. Another tool that I like to use is a ball. Doesn't need to be a tennis ball. Any kind of ball that you can kind of grab in your hand. So when we have kids who will not even let you in their space, they're just, if you come within 3 feet of them, they're getting angrier and angrier and angrier. This is a strategy I really like to use where you have a ball and you're just gonna toss it and catch it. You could bounce it. I tend to lose control. Maybe you bounce it on a toy or something like that. So I tend to toss, but you could bounce. And you're gonna see if they start to watch. Lots of times you'll see the eyes first. They're seeing what you're doing. We don't have to, again, do it to them. Here, I'm throwing this ball for you. Now we're just throwing the ball. We're just catching the ball. I add counting to it, and I'll just sit and I'll see if they're noticing. Give it some time. Maybe count to 10 twice and see if they're starting to notice. And then after I've done that and I've gotten to 10, maybe I ask them if they want the ball. It doesn't have to be with words. I can just hold the ball out, see if they're willing to take it. Maybe that's them starting to accept some regulation strategies, or maybe they don't, and then I just try it again. If they didn't take it and throw it away, maybe they're kind of accepting it, or they're thinking about whether they're gonna, start to calm their body down. If they do take it, I might offer some ball rolls. So then, you come sit here. We could do rolls, and we could say something like, should we roll on your legs or your arms?
Arms.
Arms. So then I'm going to do some rolls on your arms. And I might say, can I roll on your back? Yeah. Rolls on your back. And with the rolls, I'm usually going to get a little bit of pressure again, so we're getting that deep pressure in there, but just kind of rhythmic, so around and around and around. This is a good one to give choice, like I was just modeling. Do you want this or that? And do you want to try to roll on me? Do you want to roll on my arm? She said no, so then we won't do that. If they want to, sometimes that gives them more control and they can try to roll on my arm, and that's really starting to kind of connect and move forward from that really dysregulated state. Great strategy to use. Love using balls. You ready for back pats? All right, let's sit up. So another great way to offer choice for our kids who are really upset and maybe aren't doing saying exactly what they want or need is I like to do 2 hands out, and I'll offer one choice with one hand and one choice with the other. So do you want back pats on you, or do you want to pat my back? Okay, go ahead. So when kids choose to do something like pat your back or do the regulation strategy on you, it's typically pretty regulating for them as well. If she's giving me some heavy pats, she's still getting input into her body, and she feels so much more control over the activity.
Ow.
And I can kind of model, I was feeling pretty stressed too when you were feeling upset, so those back pats are helping my body feel calm. It's a great time to model it. And then I might say, can I have a turn to pat your back? Yeah. And then I want to give her some pretty solid back pats there. And pats are the same thing. They don't have to be on our back. They could be on our legs. Sometimes when I have kids who really won't let me get close to them, they'll let me pat their legs or their knees or something like that, where we can that's where we start. That's how we get in and we start our regulation, and then maybe we'll accept some other things. Good job. So the last one I want to show you today is another one that I bet a lot of you do, which is drawing letters or numbers on a back or an arm or a leg. Can you sit up? All right, so we're writing letters on a back. It's the same thing. We're going to ask for consent, and then we're going to write letters. But what's really important about this one is that you can offer a lot of choice. Should we do letters or numbers? Should I do one or two? Letters. Okay, we'll do letters. Come here, I'll do letters.
Whoa.
And then this is that light touch. So it's kind of alerting, but a lot of times that brings kids in. And then we want to end it with a rub or a pat on their back to kind of close that activity out. So if I'm going to do the letter T and that's all I'm going to do, then at the end I'm going to give them a squeeze or a pat and say, oh, T's all done. And then do we want more, or are we all done with the activity? You know, we're all done with letters and now we're moving on. So when we have those light touch, just like the rice, we want to kind of close that out with something that's a little more deep pressure to let the body know that we're coming back down, we're calming down, or we're done with that alerting activity. So then, those are some great strategies to get you guys started. I think in summary, you know, you just want to remember that you want to be proactive, teach all your kids when they're calm, use the strategies as classroom strategies. You want to ask for consent, give choices and control when you can. You want to provide those co-regulation strategies knowing that you're regulated yourself. Otherwise, it's going to be really difficult for you to help a kid regulate themselves. And then the big question of like, how do we know if it's working? Tay, you can go back and sit over there. Is how do we know that it's working? So typically, unfortunately, we're not going to do one of these strategies and all of a sudden it just works. We're going to have to wait. We're going to have to give it time. We might have to try it again and again and again, and then we might see progress over time. So we're looking at decreased intensity, duration, or frequency over time. Do they only get upset 3 times a day, whereas they used to get upset 5 times a day? Then maybe your strategies are working. We also want to look for increased acceptance of strategies, or less of that running away or the rigid body or things like that, because that also means they're growing. We want to see if they maybe ask for a bear hug instead of us having to offer. That's them showing growth in that those regulation skills. It might be slow, but we have to be patient and kind of watch that over time.